Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be tackling a topic that is complex, and I'm going to try to keep it sort of big picture overview, and that is going to be if you're trying to decide on your first gun, what should you get? So this comes about because now, for those that don't know, I am posting exclusive content for Mug Club folks. So one video a week that's exclusive over there. And for folks that don't know, Mug Club is a membership where you can sign up, and for an annual membership, and it's $89, you get a free month with code Mr. Guns and Gear. But there's exclusive content over there from folks like Steven Crowder, Brian Callen, Nick DiPaolo. They're much funnier than me. I'm kind of the outcast of the group where I don't do funny stuff. But their content is great. And obviously over there, because it's behind a paywall, we can say things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to say with the big tech censorship that we are dealing with here in America, and I suppose all around the world right now. And because I've been posting the content over there for the Mug Club members, I've been getting a lot of questions, which is awesome. And that helps me guide the content that I'm going to create over there. So for that, I wanted to talk about this question because I was getting it very frequently from the folks over at Mug Club. And that was, I want to get my first gun. What should I get, right? So there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, and we may do different videos on this theme down the road, but we're going to focus on handguns today. And the reason for that is when you're deciding that question, you want to get your first gun, what should you get? Basically, you have your categories of rifle, pistol, and shotgun, just to keep it simple. And if you're only going to have one, I recommend you get a handgun. And the reason for that is you can always have a handgun. If you're going to Walmart, if you're defending your home, whatever the case may be, if there's an active shooter scenario going on, you can have a handgun there, because most places, in most scenarios, you have the ability to carry it concealed if you want to, which means folks don't have to know about it, and you can have it, and you can have your natural right to defend yourself as you see fit. Whereas a rifle and shotgun, kind of hard to concealed carry a Remington 870 shotgun. So we are going to go for handguns. Now, just keep in mind that of the three options that we just listed there, the lethality or stopping power of a handgun is definitely less than most rifles and most shotguns. It's a compromise for sure. And what you're going to find as we go through this list, there's going to be a lot of compromises. So with that, let's get into our criteria rather. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be budget, right? So you kind of have to set yourself a budget. And what I recommend is, in 2023, with the options that we have available, I would recommend something for your first gun in the $300 to $800 range. Reason for that is, below that, you may or may not get a quality firearm. Probably if I was to make this video 5 years ago, I would have bumped that up to $400, but now we have so many good options in that budget tier that you're really not sacrificing reliability in a lot of cases. If you go with something cheaper, you might be sacrificing features, things like that. But reliability, that core reliability, there's a lot of guns on that low end that absolutely meet that standard. And again, for Mug Club members, we will actually give you guys recommendations of specific models at the end of the video. But up on the higher end, you'll see guns here on the $800 mark. And the reason for that is there's going to be some things that, if you guys want like a brand that you can really trust, things like that, they're generally speaking not going to be in the $300 range. In terms of a long established brand, you think of the big boys, Colt, Smith & Wesson, Glock, etc., guns that have been around forever. They tend to be towards that upper tier. Those guns also tend to have some advantages that the lower tier guns don't have. We'll talk about that. But what I would say is that if you have a budget of $300 to $800, you absolutely can get a good gun that will be reliable, accurate, easy to shoot, all of those things. So that's kind of where I would be. There definitely are guns that are cheaper than that. Everybody kind of thinks of the High Point as a good example of that. You can get one for like $150, but I would never recommend that to someone outside of very, very, very slim circumstances that most of you guys are probably not finding yourself in if you can afford to have internet in 2023. So that's our budget that we're going to look at. And I should also note that on the higher end of that, which there are a ton, you get a lot of competition guns, things like that, that are going to be above that price range. And for somebody getting their first gun, I wouldn't really recommend that. There's no need to. And a lot of those features just aren't appreciated by new folks. It's kind of like somebody asking to buy their first car and you recommend a Lamborghini. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. The same is true here on a lot of those really high-end guns. Caliber. So in this example, we are going to assume that you're going to be purchasing the firearm for self-defense, home defense, defense of your family, defense of the nation, whatever the case may be. So you want the firearm to have the ability to stop something or someone that is a threat to your life, whether that be a rabid dog or a home invader. And so for that, we're going to exclude options like 22 and things like that. And what I always say is the smallest, lightest recoiling, least powerful rounds that I recommend are going to be either if it is a semi-automatic firearm, which we'll get into these differences here in a second. If it's a semi-automatic firearm, 380, it's the lowest I would go in terms of power factor and size and weight. And the lowest I would go for a revolver is a 38 special. That said, there are a ton of advantages to bumping that up a little bit and just going 9mm. 9mm is going to be a little bit more powerful, but the bullet selection is just tremendous compared to the other two, and the performance that you can get out of it in terms of what is considered a good defensive round is just much better. It just is. Both of these will certainly work, 380 and 38 special. And I should also note, while I'm pointing at the board, people get really worked up in these whiteboard videos about not being able to read the board. If you can't read the board because you're looking on your phone or whatever the case may be, or there's some glare, just know there's nothing on the board that I'm not going to say. It's really there for me to guide me through the video so I don't lose my train of thought, and not so much for you guys to read at home. Obviously, if I was going to do that, I would just throw up a PowerPoint or something like that, but it's for me so I can track it. But as I was saying, there's been plenty of folks who have survived defensive counters with 380 or 38 special, for sure. But if you can, as a general rule, I'm going to recommend 9mm for almost everyone. Now, for calibers that are more powerful than that, one thing I'd recommend looking at if you guys are just bored and want to learn more about terminal ballistics, which is a video topic that we definitely can get into on Mug Club if you guys want me to. But look at the FBI's ballistic testing and what they recommend. And generally speaking, what they'll recommend is a round that will penetrate somewhere between 12 to 18 inches. There's a lot of reasons for that. Again, it's a video for another day. And a lot of the smaller calibers can't reliably do that. And a lot of the bigger calibers will do it just as well as 9mm, but really outside of exotic ones, I realize this is a big statement for a lot of the gun nerds down below, but 9mm will do it just as well as 45, 40, etc. The list goes on. And 9mm, generally speaking, will be cheaper and it will be easier to shoot well, particularly for folks who are buying their first gun. So that is going to be the caliber end of this part of the video. Obviously, we could go way deeper into all of these. Size and weight. So some things to think about here is going to be, as a general rule, a larger gun, all things being equal, which they almost never are, but in this example, sometimes they are. All things being equal, a larger and heavier gun will be easier to shoot well. That said, if it is larger and heavier, it's harder to concealed carry if you're going to be using it for that role. It's also going to be harder just to carry in general. So some guns, like steel frame, full-size guns, can get up to 50 ounces. And obviously that's pounds that we're talking about having to carry around all day on your hip. And it gets heavy, and it gets heavy real quick. So that said, while they are easier to shoot well, bigger guns, there are advantages to smaller guns like concealment, weight, comfort, things like that. Capacity, obviously the larger the gun, assuming that we're speaking of these three calibers here, which is what I recommend for new shooters, one of these three calibers, we're going to stomp on that one. But assuming that we're going with one of those calibers, a larger gun, all things being equal, will have more capacity. And more capacity, I've never heard of anyone ever who's been involved in a gunfight that has thought, man, I really wish I had less rounds for whatever I just encountered. Now, that said, it's important to reference that most gunfights in America, this is for civilians, not police officers, not military members, just regular folks who are either defending their home, stopping a robber, stopping a school shooter, whatever the case may be. Most defensive encounters are solved, i.e. the problem is stopped, by firing 3 or less rounds. It's over 80% are going to fall in that category. Now, do you want to only have 3 rounds when you need 5? No, right? So having more rounds generally speaking, is always going to be a good thing. That said, there's going to be some things I'm going to recommend and talk about here in a second that are only going to have 5 or 6 or 7 rounds in terms of capacity. And for the vast majority of folks, it's going to work out just fine if you guys are having that gun or equipped with that gun or using that gun. But of course, if you can have 21 or 30 rounds, that's better, right? It's never a bad thing. Talking about, does it fit my hand? So we're going to talk about this in the context of a new shooter. So it brings me to one of the points that we're going to expand upon there. So as a general rule, we have different ways to grip firearms. This is a training gun. It's an airsoft gun. Doesn't shoot real bullets, which I definitely recommend getting. These are pretty cheap. I think this one's like 30 bucks, and it's a Walther PPQ clone, and it allows you to do manipulations and things like that very easily without having to work with a real gun. So it's safe and all those sorts of things. And of course, a real gun is perfectly safe as well, as long as you follow the safety rules. But in terms of fitting my hand, with a semi-auto, your grip is generally going to look something like this. There are trainers that will recommend different variances of that grip. That's fine. With a revolver, it is going to look something like this, something like this. Some folks do that. Yeah, that's kind of an iffy one in there. But the reason I say that is people will often go and get their first gun and they'll say, oh, this one doesn't fit my hand, this one doesn't feel comfortable, or this one does feel comfortable, or this one doesn't feel comfortable, and they're gripping the firearm incorrectly. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that leads me to the point of, if you can, seek out instruction from either somebody you know who knows about guns, or better yet, if you can, a professional self-defense oriented pistol instructor. Those folks see a wide variety of different skill sets all the time, and hopefully they're able to impart knowledge into new folks in ways that maybe, you know, your uncle who knows about guns but doesn't have experience teaching new folks, if that makes sense, maybe he can't do, but that professional trainer can do. So if you can do that, I recommend it. Additionally, I recommend, if you can, I realize it's not possible for everyone, to try shooting like at a rental range or something like that. Some of the guns that we're going to recommend before you actually purchase, because you will be able to tell if you like them or don't like them. But again, like I said, don't just go out and just rent a bunch of guns without any instruction. I mean, you can, but it's not ideal. And the reason is you could be using them incorrectly and come away with a sense that a gun either is for you or isn't for you. And you don't want that conclusion to be drawn from a use of bad technique, if that makes sense. So that is the fit my hand. The next thing we're going to talk about is limp wristing. So what that means is how you grip a firearm. And this is true for everyone, but it is especially true when we're talking about people picking up their first gun. So with semi-automatic firearms, we'll use this example, sticking with the theme, I guess. There are other guns out here that aren't Walthers, but this is a Walther PEP. It is a full-size 9mm, but the key point to that is that it is a semi-automatic, which means every time we pull the trigger, the slide will cycle like this, put a new round in the chamber, and then you can pull the trigger again, and the gun will fire. That will continue until the magazine is out of rounds. Now, integral and mandatory for all of that to work correctly is that you grip the pistol firmly. That's how they're designed. Guns are a martial tool. They're designed for violence. They're designed for very hard use. And with that, a semi-automatic is designed for you to be gripping this with a certain amount of force. If you grip it really lightly, really low down here with a limp wrist like this, when the slide goes to cycle, you won't have enough force on the gun and you'll have a malfunction. This is especially true with any polymer frame gun. It can also be true with metal frame semi-automatics, and it's extremely important if we're talking about somebody who's buying their first gun, a new shooter, particularly if it is a female shooter, particularly if someone who has poor hand strength, any of those types of issues that could come into it. We have videos on the channel that address those in depth. But what I want to say for that is the way to eliminate the issues that could come with limp wristing is to not use a semi-automatic firearm. So for example, a revolver, which has been around a long time, this is a Smith & Wesson Model 10, for example. It doesn't matter how you hold this gun. If you, let's double check again, if you pull this trigger, it doesn't matter. The next round will just keep coming and will go into the chamber. Very simple design. Revolvers absolutely can malfunction just like semi-automatics can. They have totally different types of malfunctions. And again, that's a video for another day. But what I would say is if you are not willing, as a first-time gun owner, if you are not willing to commit to training at least, I don't know, it's hard to put a definitive line on this, but at least once a year with at least 50 rounds, and that's like the minimum. If you're not willing to commit to doing that and keeping your skills up to date, keeping your grip skill proficient specifically, then I would recommend a revolver. The reason for that is the limp wristing issue. The limp wristing issue is something that if you watch a lot of professionals, so if you watch like, you know, YouTube, or if you go to like a 3-gun competition, so people who are professional shooters, and you talk to them, very rarely will they ever bring this issue up, because for somebody who's a really experienced shooter, it's something they never encounter. But the reality is, if somebody's an inexperienced shooter, it's something you almost always encounter, unless it's, you know, there's mitigating factors to it, but it's something that you very commonly see with new shooters. And again, it absolutely can be overcome. There's not a person outside of physically disabled people who can't proficiently grip a firearm and get it to run in semi-automatic. If you look at, for example, a lot of the professional female shooters who are competitive shooters, a lot of them, almost all of them, are very small, petite women. It doesn't take super strength or anything like that, but there's techniques to it, right? So a lot of these women who are professional shooters are like literally, they're like 5'5", like 100 pounds, but they can run these guns reliably all day long because they're using the right techniques, and they've developed those skills, and they train and they practice a lot. But again, if you don't, I would recommend a revolver. I understand there are people who are competent and people whose opinions I value that will give you a different answer to that. But we're here for the Mr. Guns and Gear channel. That is my answer to that. If you're not going to commit to training, I would recommend a revolver. And the reason for that is what we just talked about. But additionally, revolvers don't require, I'm making huge generalizations here. Generally speaking, revolvers don't require as much maintenance as semi-automatic guns in terms of cleaning and lubrication. And the amount of little ladies that have had, actually this exact gun, this is Smith & Wesson Model 10, probably the most produced revolver in American history. There's a whole lot of little old ladies that have had this particular gun in a nightstand for 20 years. They've never touched it. Someone went to kick their door in, and they've successfully defended their home with very little to no training or skills other than point at the bad guy and pull the trigger until the bad guy stops doing bad guy stuff. If that is the scenario that you envision yourself with a firearm, I recommend a revolver. So I know that is going to get the comments section spun up. I'm aware of it, but I'm sticking with it. That is absolutely something I do recommend. If you are on the fence on that, one of the easier ways, and I alluded to it earlier, to mitigate the issues that can come up with limp wristing is to get a metal framed gun, either steel or aluminum. It lessens the likelihood that you're going to have limp wristing malfunctions, but it doesn't eliminate it. Revolvers eliminate it. So that is something that I always want to bring up. Another criterion factor that you want to consider rather is a proven designer brand. So if it is your first gun, I highly recommend getting a brand that's been around at least 20 years. And I say that because in the firearms industry, right now we live in the golden age of firearms. It's absolutely true. I say it all the time here on the channel. There are more good, reliable guns at affordable prices than ever before. And, you know, compared to the 80s when there was like 3 reliable guns, semi-autos that is, we're so spoiled today by it with all the different options of size, capacity, everything else that we have. And if it's your first gun, you want a gun that's, again, like I said, a company that's been around at least 20 years, right? So reasons for that is they probably have a proven design. Not all, but probably. The company's going to have customer service. So if it's your one and only gun in 20 years from now, you have an issue with it and you have a parts breakage and you want to get parts for it, parts are probably still going to be made because they've been around a long time and probably not going anywhere. And additionally, their customer service will probably still be there. That just tends to be how it works out. In America, the one that definitely comes to mind in terms of pistols that has been around forever, that ain't going anywhere, is going to be Smith & Wesson, right? It just kind of is what it is. Smith & Wesson, it's from where I'm from. For folks that don't know, I grew up right down the road from Smith & Wesson. Their factory is gigantic. I understand they're actually making a new one in Tennessee, but it's not a Smith & Wesson video. Anyway, a company that's been around at least 20 years, I would definitely go for that. It's more likely than not that they will be around in the future. There's a lot of guns that come in and have short runs in America and are really, really popular, and then they just die out, and you can't get a magazine for them, you can't get a spring for them, stuff like that. So you don't want to run into that if it's going to be your first gun, your one and only gun. So there is that. Those are the main factoring criteria that I would go over. Additionally, just talking about outside of specifics is going to be size and weight. That we alluded to it, but it's very, very important. Again, like I said, we're in the golden age of firearms, where, for example, you have guns that are very, very similar. And I guess we'll just kind of expand on size and weight because it's important. So this is a Glock 19. In terms of semi-autos, probably either it or the 17 are the most produced semi-automatic handguns in the world. Very, very popular for good reason. The 19 and specifically can do everything pretty darn well. It's a good home defense gun. It's a good concealed carry gun. It's a good competitive gun. It's just a good all-around firearm, one that I definitely recommend to folks. But this gun holds 15 rounds with a standard capacity flush magazine. And this one, which is essentially the same gun, is a Glock 43, and it only holds 6 rounds in the magazine. So as you can see there, size-wise, very different in terms of how big they are. And I realize that I just said very, very different in terms of how big they are. To a lot of you guys watching at home who don't know about firearms, they may not seem that big in terms of a difference, but I can assure you, if you were going to carry these guns on you all day long, it's a very different experience. The 43 here, which is this guy, much easier to carry, much lighter. However, when you actually go to shoot it, you're going to be able to shoot this one faster. And in a gunfight, obviously getting rounds on target quickly is very important, particularly when you're using pistol calibers. It's even more important than it would be with rifles or shotguns. Whereas with this gun, it's going to be a little bit harder to shoot. Your time between shots, between accurate shots, hopefully, is going to be a little bit slower. So those are things that you absolutely want to consider, even if you're like, oh, I want to get a Glock, because Glocks are known, they're proven, etc. Then deciding which one to get, you can go down the rabbit hole on that. Additionally, one of the reasons that having a proven design or brand can be beneficial is accessories and aftermarket accessories. So for example, we'll take a different gun here just to give you guys something different as an example. We will take this Smith & Wesson M&P. In terms of proven semi-automatics out there on the market of a modern striker-fired gun, which a striker-fired gun is just a gun that has a internal striker, but what that means is it'll have the same trigger pull every time you go to press it, which we'll talk about here in a second as well. Is going to be the Smith & Wesson M&Ps. M&P 2.0 series is out now. It's the current production version. They're very, very good, and they're very popular. So the reason I bring that up is to talk about accessories, right? So if you're going to have a pistol, one thing I recommend for anybody who's looking to get a pistol is to have a holster for it. And the reason for that is, number one, if you want to carry it, you need a holster, or you should have a holster. You don't want to go Mexican carry. I do not recommend that. And Mexican carry is carrying without a holster for folks that don't know. The Smith & Wesson M&P, very, very popular pistol. And if you want to change things out for it, things like sights are available for aftermarket guns, are available on the aftermarket for all of the popular guns, Glocks, Smith & Wessons, Berettas, Walthers, etc. There's going to be companies that make different sights that you may or may not prefer depending on things you learn as you practice and develop. Additionally, different trigger components, magazine components. The more popular and the longer time the gun has been around, the more likely you're going to have better options for those things, again, for the first time gun owner. So at this point, I think we have kind of beaten up the 5 main criteria that I would recommend. And again, I know there's a lot more criteria to get into, and we're going to close it out here for the folks on YouTube. And for the folks on Mug Club, again, we are going to go into specific recommendations for different categories, like full size, concealed. We're also going to answer those Mug Club questions that you guys have been submitting. And I think before we go over there, I'll just recommend everyone, if you're new here, follow me across my various social medias. I post tons of different deals, different articles, things that relate to this that may be of interest to you. If you're interested in this video, you'll probably like my content that I post on social media, some spicy memes as well. Additionally, if you're new here and you haven't hit the subscribe button, go ahead and do so. Also, you guys can sign up for my email at the website here on your screen. This email goes out once a month, has all my videos in it from the previous month, so it's not super spammy or anything like that. But that way, no matter what a big tech giant does in terms of censorship, my videos will still go straight into your inbox regardless of where I actually upload them. So there is that. Additionally, deals email. We have a daily deals email here. It goes out every single day, as the name indicates. Guns, ammo, optics, sights, magazines, any deals on those will go out my daily deals email. It's in that email. It's the cheapest I know of anywhere on the internet on that particular day. And so that way it saves you guys some time, because I've already done the looking for you, and hopefully saves you some money as well. And again, we're going to end it there on YouTube. We're headed over to Mug Club for specific recommendations, actual models I recommend in different budgets, all of those sorts of things, and to answer those questions. So with that, YouTube, piss off.